Hey, what's going on, guys? It's Turin here with another Warhammer Total War online commentary. In this particular battle, I'll be playing the Dwarves, and I'm going to be facing off against the Greenskins. So we got a ancestral grudge match about to go on, and you guys are in for a treat. I got some really fun units in my army, so hopefully you guys will enjoy this one. But anyways, let's get right into the action. So first thing I probably want to point out is I have two gyrocopters. So these are just the standard gyrocopters with the steam cannons. They do well against squigs, they do well against biggins, against the rusty errors. Just a very well-rounded unit against the Greenskins. So I'm a big fan of bringing two of these. And then this is the treat you guys are in for. I know a few of you guys had requested it on the channel, but I did bring the Skyhammer. So he does have armor-piercing missiles. It has improved bombing, which you guys will see shortly, and it is so much fun. And something also to note is it does have 312 armor-piercing missile damage, which is really big. So if you're focusing it on like an Arachnarch Queen or some Black Orcs or something like that, it can do quite a bit of sustained damage. But again, it is a relatively vulnerable target in being that there's only one model and it's kind of big and slow moving, relatively speaking. Although I suppose, what does it have? 90 speed to the 110 of the regular gyrocopters. So, but if you let the rusty errors focus it with some other goblin archers, and if they happen to have like a wyvern or a war boss, it can go down pretty quick. So definitely something you have to protect, but you guys are really going to enjoy the bombing runs here. So as far as the rest of my army goes, I have some Longbeards, Warriors of Dragonfire Pass, and then I actually brought Norgrimling's Iron Breakers. So I don't know if I've ever actually used these in one of my replays, but man, they look so freaking cool. And these guys are just absolute linebackers. If you can get them against units that aren't Black Orcs, they will last all freaking day. They have 120 armor. Looks like their leadership right now, when buffed, is 121. They have 49 melee attack, 83 melee defense, which is quite absurd. And their weapon damage isn't that great. It's only at 31. So these guys will definitely hold the line for quite a while. And their special attack, the satchel charges, actually do quite a bit of damage against low tier troops like goblins and things like that. So big fan of these guys. I mean, again, in a competitive sense, I don't know if I would recommend them, but for this particular game, I really enjoyed them. So you guys will get to see it. We got a runesmith here, and then of course in the back line, you are going to be running into some Black Orcs, so you do need to be ready for that. So I have Longbeards with great weapons. I have the Grumbling Guard for that aura, and then I have some Dwarf Warriors in the rear. The Dwarf Warriors are simply there to just kind of provide some support against rear charges and flanks and all those type of things, and are essentially a throwaway unit, unfortunately, but they'll do their best. So that's pretty much it for my army. So my opponent has a pretty interesting army as well. He has the Arachnarch Queen. He's got a bunch of Night Goblins in the front line, and it looks like he has two big bosses here as well as an Orc War Boss somewhere in here. I know. I remember seeing it, so hopefully we'll get to that. But he also has Black Orcs. He has the Warlord's Boys, I believe. It looks like he has the Regiment of Renown, the Rusty Errors. Then he has a whole line of Black Orcs. So you can see Black Orcs here, Black Orcs here. He actually has the Crimson Killers somewhere. Yeah, it looks like they're over on the far end. And then, of course, he has the Orc War Boy Biggins over here. So they're not a terrible choice against the Dwarves. They do have armor piercing, and if I do decide to land my gyrocopters, they'll do some serious damage there. So very fun stuff. But anyways, let's get right into the action, guys. So you can see that gyrocopters are immediately starting off in my opponent's forces. They're shooting at these Night Goblins, and they do a ton of damage. And you can see that the Night Goblins are actually already shaken. But as soon as I discovered the Rusty Errors, that's their job, is just to drive those guys off. Because the Rusty Errors are extremely devastating against the Dwarves. So you can see they're going to fire there. And what was really nice about the starting position was my opponent started in the forest, so he could probably come around and flank me and take advantage of cannon position. But since I didn't really bring any really vulnerable threats, I was able to just posture up and put my entire army in this chokehold here. So this is literally the hot gates from 300. We're ready to go, and this is going to be a bad time for the Greenskin forces that have to march through here. And I should probably also mention that I do have Grombrindle as my lord and two runesmiths. I actually didn't bring a Thane because the Norgrimling's Iron Breakers were so darn expensive, and I think I actually get a bomb here. So it's coming soon, guys, and I really want to make sure to show you guys the bomb because it is so freaking fun. So the Iron Breakers are throwing their satchel charges in there, and look at the damage it does to low tier troops like goblins. They're already ready to break, so they're probably just going to come in here and bounce off these dwarves in the front line. And as soon as the Skyhammer comes in and drops a bomb, it's going to be pretty cool. I'm really excited to show you guys that. So the steam cannons are continuing to shoot. Some of the regular gyrocopters in the back doing their bombing runs, and it looks like the front line has engaged for the most part. And you can see those guys are already broken. Another, the satchel charge is continuing to just devastate this goblin front line. So it looked like his initial strategy was to kind of occupy my front line and then use his more elite troops to kind of, run around the back and apply some pressure. But I'm able to reposition the steam cannons to start shooting at these Orc War Boy Biggins, and I do have the Dwarf Warriors here ready, and they do have the charge defense against large foes, so he's probably not going to want to charge right into those trees there. So the Skyhammer I just kind of had sitting up here, picking away at these troops, more specifically shooting at the Arachnarch Spider. Those heavy duty kind of missile attacks, it's going to do pretty darn good. But this is definitely going to be a rough situation here. These Grumbling Guard back here are probably going to take a bit of a beating, but I do get a nice Rune of Wrath rune here. So right now, let's see if we can get a bomb. I'm just waiting for it. I think he may have just dropped it and actually just devastated that whole group. So eventually I will get it for you guys, I promise. So stay tuned, guys. In the back line, you can see that the Orc War Boss is engaged with the Grumbling Guard, so at least they do have the armor piercing so they can get through his defenses. and hopefully they'll do pretty well against the spider. So looks like we're coming in for a bombing run here, and you can see that does a lot of damage. That took out a ton of models and sends those guys running to the hills. So they're down to 11 models, continuing to take steam cannon fire, so very, very good situation. More importantly, this guy with his kind of, I believe it's like a minigun type animation, but it is armor piercing, and against the Ragnarok Queen and heroic units, it actually does quite a bit of damage. So the Orc Warboss is surrounded in here by the Grumbling Guards, so not a good situation for him, but in the front line, Big Papa Grombrindle is, he's going to town. He's got his boys around him, and obviously goblins are going to be pretty easy for him, but you know, he still has this Arachnarok Queen in here who's tearing into his back line a little bit, so we're going to see Grombrindle get in there. Kind of like the High King Thorgrim cinematic a little bit, but he gets knocked back into the fray, which is very, very typical when fighting against the Spider Queen. It's very easy to do with the Spider Queen. You just literally attack something and it flies away, so you can knock him to your troops and other things like that. And finally, he's getting his Black Orc, so definitely a little delayed in that. It looks like he sent an initial shock force in, wanted to soften me up, and now he's coming in. Personally, I would have sent them in together, but you know, I think there may have been something that was holding them up. I think I actually had my Dwarf Warriors just get slaughtered by them, tie them up or something or other. But anyways, we should get a nice little bombing run here. You can see that upgraded bomb. It takes out a few of the Crimson Killer models. It does pretty good against the Black Orc, so things are going pretty well here. But unfortunately, now he does have these armor-piercing troops on my Iron Breakers who are still at 83 models, so they've barely taken any damage. But this is definitely going to be a matchup that really favors the Black Orcs because the Iron Breakers, they have pretty low weapon damage, and obviously they're not designed for armor-piercing. Though their high melee defense at 83 will allow them to last a long, long time. So that was definitely an upside of all of that. So essentially what melee defense does, I know some of you guys have asked, is weapon strength determines the amount of damage when contact is made. So melee defense is kind of the stat which determines the likeliness of being hit. So the higher the melee defense on a unit, essentially the less likely it is to actually be hit by something. So then, you know, the melee attack is, if it's surpassed, then the contact is dictated by armor as well as weapon strength. So just a little crash course there. So you can see the Rune of Wrath and Rune is going off, but unfortunately the Crimson Killers got back here and were able to put a little bit of a beat down on some of my low tier Dwarf Warriors, which is to be expected. You can see Big Papa Grombrindle is picking up on this threat, and hopefully he'll be able to get over here. But these Crimson Killers are going to make pretty short work of these dwarves here. They have a little bit of splash damage. They hit really freaking hard with 42 weapon strength, 44 melee attack, but they are taking, you know, substantial damage from, you know, one of my Runesmiths hit them earlier, as well as my Gyrocopters, which were dropping some bombs on them as well. But you can see the Dwarf Warriors are down to 30 models and are rapidly dropping. But Grombrindle should keep them in the fight for a little bit of time. Here in the main line, you can see the Dwarf Warriors and the Longbeards are holding out against these Black Orcs, but this is a very, very tough fight. You know, if he had maybe brought all the Black Orcs through the valley, it could have been tricky, but on that same note, they would have been bottlenecked in there and could have been bombed really, really easily. So I still think maybe a little bit earlier on them would have been helpful. But the Gyrocopters are continuing to press our opponents. You can see that the Orc Warboss is being focused down by the Sky Hammer, which is just doing an absolute ton of damage. So that's something that, you know, definitely something I never considered it for. It was like a heavy anti-armor piercing unit, but, you know, again, still, you know, just evaluating it from this game, I don't know if I would bring it again because it's just, I mean, if I were really, really trying to win, because it's just such a liability as one unit. You know, a single Wyvern or something like that can just drive it off, and that's so much money you're losing for that one Gyrocopter. But it does have 5 bombs actually, so you can get a lot of value out of it. So back in the pits, we got the Black Orcs fighting against the Runesmith and other units, and unfortunately I don't have a ton of armor-piercing stuff left. You can see it's mostly the Warriors of Dragonfire Pass fighting in here with some Iron Breakers, but the Iron Breakers were actually able to drive off the Arachnarok Queen a little bit, but it is still confident, so it'll most likely be back in here. And he does have some Night Goblins, which are also poisoning my units, but still, that's not that devastating against the Iron Breakers. It's literally these guys are like hitting them with wet noodles when they fight against Iron Breakers, so it's pretty great. But unfortunately, the Crimson Killers are coming in, and the Orc Warboss has rallied, and he's using the DAWI and all of these things, and of course the Arachnarok Queen herself is back, so very, very tough situation. You can see some of my Gyrocopters have already run out of ammo, and they're now landing among the troops, and that Black Orc just got rammed into oblivion. He actually got decapitated by the blades of the flame, which is very cool. And he also did summon his spider hatchlings now, which he had been saving. Definitely very timely, because now I'm starting to get a little bit surrounded. You can see he has this huge contingent of Black Orcs here, and I just have this little pocket of Dwarvish resistance. Looks like I have 40 Iron Breakers who, thankfully, due to their extremely high leadership, are still in good shape, but you can see Grombrindle is just being an absolute champ. He's at about, like, what is it, 20, 30%? He's still fighting like a boss. He gets a nice melee attack in there on the Arachnarok Queen and is able to kind of stun her, but of course gets immediately knocked down. I do retaliate by using the Rune of Oath and Steel and the Rune of Negation, which is very, very important in this close battle, so he's continuing to karate chop this big spider. My opponent still has 2 Goblin Big Bosses, which are getting in here and are doing a ton of work. So very tough situation. You can see he's cycle charging them, so he's pulling them back. He's coming back in, so Grombrindle's having a lot of trouble surviving here. But thankfully, some DAWI have come from the forest to reinforce their lord, and a lot of these Ironbreakers have begun to stabilize because the Rune of Wrath and Rune was finally starting to get through, because I still did have that Runesmith, which is really good in those type battles, and you can see that guy gets a nice little melee attack there. I actually do have some Longbeards with great weapons in the mix there, so that was probably a big reason as to why I was able to stabilize here. So finally, the Dwarf Lord and Grombrindle and the boys are able to surround the last of the Greenskin troops and are going to lay the absolute smackdown on this guy. So definitely a good situation. You can see Grombrindle with the official execution of that guy there, which also in turn will signal the end of the game. So I hope you guys enjoyed that Dwarf cast. That was a really fun game. Good excuse to use the Skyhammer as well as the Hot Gates there, as you guys saw. So very, very fun stuff. So let's get into the breakdown here. So as far as the special forces go, look at the amount of kills the Ironbreakers racked up. Now, I know they were goblin kills for the most part, but still very, very cool. Skyhammer actually racked up 58 kills, which is pretty good. And, you know, more specifically, it was actually focusing large units most of the time, as you guys can as you saw. I did have it on the Arachnarch Queen. I had it on the Orc War Boss. And, you know, it still managed to get 58 kills. And, of course, the Steam Cannons, these guys are just so good in the Greenskin matchup. They can deal with so many threats, especially, you know, Cav and those type of things. They do really well against, you know, goblins, obviously. But more importantly, the primary reason I bring these is just to shut down Durusty Heirs, just shut them down. And, you know, even against like Orc Shamans and lightly armored heroic units, they can do pretty well. And they do have that 68 melee attack or weapon strength on their melee attacks as well, so not terrible. So my opponent's forces, obviously the goblins, as you guys saw, got absolutely decimated by the Skyhammer and the bombs and the satchel charges in the valley, but the Black Orcs came in and did a pretty good job, but they were a little late to the party, but still. Arachnarch Queen, of course, always a threat. So well played to my opponent, Cat Dad. I look forward to seeing you again on ladder, and I hope you guys enjoyed that Dwarf cast. Have an excellent night, and take care.